Breaking news on our desk right now. The FDA is banning the use of red dye 3. This is the synthetic dye that is in countless cereals, candies, fruit cocktails, and more to give, that bright red cherry color, right?
Update now on red dye number 3 as U.S. regulators have officially banned the dye from the nation's food supply. FDA granted a 2022 petition filed by 24 food safety and health advocates which urge the agency to revoke authorization that is used by many candy and snack cake makers. Move comes 35 years after the cosmetic industry banned the substance because of potential cancer risks.
Usually used in candies, cakes, cookies, frostings, and even some ingested drugs like cough medications or gummy vitamins.
Well, at least 2 studies have shown that high levels of this particular food dye were linked to cancer in rats. However, the link between the dye and cancer has not been proven yet in humans. Food companies have until 2027 to make these changes. Red number 3 dye has been banned in Europe for decades. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's there's red dye 40 that's in a lot of commonly used products, food products. So, I mean, it's a step, it seems, in the right direction, but we shall see.
Right, and it's interesting, the government subsidizes it. Why would the government want to subsidize something that's going to make people sick? And then in the end, we all end up paying for that in terms of healthcare costs, which are skyrocketing.
Yeah, because that is a direct result of corruption. About 75% of FDA's budget comes from regulated industry, and that means food processors and pharmaceutical industry. All of them profit from a sick population.
A big item that, and by the way, it's getting very expensive, are cereals. Why is the food coloring in particular bad?
Food coloring, you see here yellow food coloring, that is a petroleum product. It's associated with really, with depression. It's associated with autoimmune injuries and ADHD.
Yeah.
And red dye also is very bad. In Europe, these same companies are producing the same products, but they're using natural coloring. But here they can get away with it. We have about almost 1,000 chemicals that are in our food that are either outright banned in Europe or actively discouraged. So you wouldn't be able to buy this kind of stuff in Europe. You ask about why it's so cheap, why it's so ubiquitous. It's because we subsidize the worst foods. We subsidize it with about 70% of our food stamp program is to processed foods, which are all poison.
Right. One of the things that's interesting is you'll see on labels natural flavors, which is this catch-all phrase that I guess was lobbied for, but the ingredients in natural flavors are not really natural.
No. In our country, natural flavors are chemical products. So you can't trust what's on the ingredient label, and the reason for that, again, is government corruption. It's that the agency, the USDA, the FDA, have been captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. And they all have an interest in subsidies and then in mass poisoning the American public.
Yeah, I want to talk about pesticides, and then let's talk about the policy. So let's talk about the pesticides and the things that worry you about. I mean, this looks like fresh food, right? What should I be worried about here?
Yeah, I mean, the irony is, like, for example, my wife loves kale, and she had the impression that kale is actually good for you. If it's organic, it's very good for you, but most kale and strawberries, for example, grapes, are contaminated with pesticides, and particularly the Environmental Working Group has found what they call the dirty dozen, some of the worst pesticides on these products. So, I look at a strawberry and I think, oh, this is a healthy food,
right.
But in most cases, unless it's organic, certified organic, you are getting something that's actually hurting you.
I think people misunderstand Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy. He's really all about the science. I've sat down with him, met with him for the first time. I've not known him until I sat down with him because I wanted to understand what he was thinking. And after hours of sitting down with him, I was so impressed. He knows more about the science than most doctors. What he says, let me give you some examples about this red dye, blue dye. etc. I tweeted, that's been published for 12 years in very reputable journals that they're carcinogenic. Now think about this. We know for 12 years they're carcinogenic. The Europeans know they're carcinogenic. Guess what the Europeans do? They ban it. So I went to London and found a food, a candy, and called I won't name the company so I won't get them into trouble. The candy and the company, the same candy in the US, and I put them together. The UK, zero food coloring. Coloring comes from vegetables, beets, etc. In the US, it's all this red dye, blue dye. Why do we allow, when we know scientifically that there's carcinogens in the things we're giving to our children, and in the UK and Europe, they banned it, but we allow it? Why?
This petroleum-based dye has been a staple in thousands of products, and if you can believe it, for more than 50 years in the U.S. The FDA says more than 200,000 pounds of red dye number 3 are used in food and drugs every year in the U.S. It's in so many products we consume: cereals, candies, jellies, sweets, even medicines. Last year, the FDA received a request to revoke the use of red dye number 3 in food and ingested drugs.
For the FDA to actually ban anything, they're going to need to see enough research to show that it is in fact physically harmful to our health. And that's going to be one of the biggest obstacles. Because
Lisa Moskovitz is a registered dietitian and author of a book on personalized nutrition plans.
the threshold for where it becomes harmful, most people and children fall well below, on average, how much they're consuming.
In 1990, the FDA banned the use of red dye number 3 in cosmetics and medicated ointments because research showed in high doses it can cause cancer in animals. In a statement to Fox 5, the government says the FDA is actively reviewing a petition filed for FD&C red number 3, which is authorized for use as a color additive in food and ingested drugs. The FDA hopes to make a regulatory determination on FD&C red number 3 soon. But no matter when that decision comes, for some, it's already too late. Many point to countries where the colorant is banned, including Australia, the United Kingdom, Japan, China, and New Zealand.
The short-term side effects that research has shown, allergies, behavioral changes, long-term ADHD, and potentially could be carcinogenic. But again, that's so far only in lab rats.
And even if a ban does take effect, it could take years before the colorant is officially worked out of the U.S. food supply. Best advice, read the label on everything you eat.
Yeah, 1,000%. You can't do that enough.
Sometimes it's scary when you do that, but you should. All right.
If it's made from petroleum, it doesn't seem too surprising.
The petroleum part is upsetting.
That ingesting it would cause some health problems. What are the potential health problems?
Right. So, and in fact, this has been banned in cosmetics and topical medications since 1990. It is still in food and medications you take by mouth.
So you can't put it on your skin, but you can ingest it?
Which is really bizarre, right?
What?
But at the same, so going back to, what is the data? So in male rats specifically, we've seen an increased risk in thyroid cancer. In kids, and this is data from Britain from about 15, 20 years ago, as well as more recent data from California from 2021, showing an association between these kinds of synthetic dyes and hyperactivity disorders in kids.
So based on what you're saying, why is this even a conversation? I'm thinking, what does California know that the rest of us don't? And how worried should people actually be about it?
Some of that same data out of the UK, that same 2021 data from California. Now, one thing interestingly here is red dye number 40 has not been banned in contrast to red dye number 3 in some countries. They're both available here and used here. But packaging in the UK and the EU has to have a warning if there is red dye number 40.
We don't have that.
We don't have that.
We're always encouraged to read the labels.
Yes.
On all your products. Well, I never do is right.
Why should people be worried about these kind of products?
Seed oils are one of the most unhealthy ingredients that we have in foods. And seed oils, the reason they're in the foods is because they're heavily subsidized. They're very, very cheap, but they are associated with all kinds of very, very serious illnesses, including body-wide inflammation.
Right.
Which affects all of our health. It's one of the worst things you can eat, and it's almost impossible to avoid. If you eat any processed food, you're going to be eating seed oil.